My wife and I are both rather frugal. The day we were married, her father, who was sitting next to me at the dining table, leaned over and said, "Her parsimony will endear her to you." He was absolutely right. A consequence of our mutual distaste for spending money is that when we have a furniture need, we tend to build it ourselves or pick up something secondhand. Craigslist is our friend. This video is the story of how we reused an old piece of furniture to create a much-needed bookshelf. We're both readers, and it seems like we never have enough shelf space for our books. At the same time, we have 3 very hairy dogs and a dusty environment, so we tend to appreciate enclosed storage spaces. Making the new bookshelf a barrister bookshelf, the kind with glass front doors, was the ideal solution. The story begins in 2013 when we needed some office furniture for my wife's home office. We found an incredible deal on Craigslist for a beautiful arrangement that had been custom built for the previous owner. As nice as it was, the monster was more than 10 feet long and 7 feet tall. We had to break it down into many pieces for transport, managing to fill up a 5x10 trailer and the entire back end of our truck. My wife's office didn't have any walls long enough for the full assembly unless she was willing to block a window, which she wasn't. Instead, we created 2 separate cabinet units, putting the workstation wing on one of them. It has worked out very well for her. However, we were left with one odd piece. The center cabinet from the original assembly didn't find a home in the new setup. We took off the glass doors and stored them somewhere safe, and then tucked the cabinet into the garage. It sat against a back wall for 5 years, collecting dust and bugs and various odds and ends that also had no other home. It became an island of misfit household items. Years later, my wife and I were discussing the possibilities for some new bookshelves. We had an odd little space next to our bedroom closet that could accommodate something about 28 inches wide and 15 inches deep. She brought up the old cabinet. I went into the garage and stared at the disreputable-looking piece, thinking about how unpleasant it would be to dig it out of the spider webs and wondering where I'd put all the stuff that was sitting on it. But my measuring tape insisted that it was the right size for the job, so I got into my grubbies and broke out the shop vac. The cabinet had been originally designed with a space underneath the doors, so I toyed with the idea of adding a base, making it taller and giving us more shelves. But my wife wanted to go the other way and cut it down so the only shelves were the ones behind the glass doors. We compromised and did it her way. I cut off the excess, leaving a few inches for kick space underneath. Using a cutout bit, I routed the back laminate at the bottom, turning the sides into legs. I spent quite a bit of time filling holes with wood dough and sanding. I worried about some old stain marks in the shape of handprints, thinking we'd have to paint the sides. Because this cabinet had been in the center of the original assembly, it hadn't needed finished sides. But by the time I was done, the sides and back had cleaned up so well that stain was looking like an option again. However, the top was still ugly. It had a big hole in it for a creepy little light fixture that we didn't need. When the top was up at 7 feet, appearance wasn't an issue, but it would be one of the most prominent features in the cabinet's new life as a 3-foot-tall bookshelf. The answer was to pick up a new piece of laminate and cover the whole top. Problem solved. There was one more construction step. The front of the cabinet needed some trim. In the original configuration, trim from the adjoining pieces had covered the facing edges. The doors were hinged, so they sat forward of the main cabinet by about 3/4 of an inch, which made them flush with that original trim. Rather than change the way the doors worked, I decided the front edges were ugly anyway and ripped new trim from a spare 1x4. I routed the edges of the trim with a small round-over bit, easing the edges somewhat. After a bit more filling and sanding, the piece was ready for finishing. I stained the piece with something called Ipswich Pine from Minwax. We use that stain for just about everything because it imparts a mellow golden tone to light woods like pine, and it's neutral enough to work with most paint colors. I was pleased with how my new trim contrasted with the side and top laminate while still blending in nicely. Our new bookshelf was starting to look like it had been designed to be a bookshelf. The last step was to layer on a couple coats of semi-gloss varathane. We find that varathane does a great job of sealing the wood and protecting the surface from moisture and abrasion damage. The stain and varnish did a great job of bringing out the grain in the laminate. It's almost a shame that no one will see the back, but it worked just as well on the sides and top. Here's the cabinet performing its new duties as a bookshelf. It made a nice addition to our bedroom. I may have to reinforce or replace those glass shelves if they turn out to be too weak for holding books, or we may just use the bottom for books and put knickknacks on the glass. Time will tell. I hope you enjoyed the story of the repurposed cabinet. Perhaps it will give you some ideas of your own for bringing old abandoned furniture pieces back to life.